This morning we're going to finish up this series on Shine, and we do have a business meeting after service today, and so I pray that you'll stick around for that. A few things that we want to address, and one of them being elected and then pastors, church and pastors council. Stay tuned for that. Let's go, Lord, in prayer this morning. Heavenly Father God, I thank you, Lord, for your love, your mercy, and your grace. Lord, I thank you for your word. And God, as we, Lord, look into your word today, I pray that you would give us wisdom, Lord, give us understanding. Lord, give us a heart and ears to hear. Lord, to not only hear, but to do, Lord, what your word instructs us. God, we thank you for your love. We thank you for your grace. Lord, and the strength that you give us. Lord, we thank you, Lord, for the calling that you give. Lord, for us to reach the world with the gospel. In Jesus' name, amen. We've been talking about our theme for the year, Shine. And this theme comes from Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus said, here in verse 14 through 16, Jesus said, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. And this is the basis for our theme. And we are to shine with the light of Christ. We're called to allow Jesus to shine through us with his love, with his grace, with his truth, and with his service. And so being the light of the world helps us fulfill our mission of the church. And you all know the drill. Our mission is to lead people to connect to God, connect to others, connect to ministry. And so this series, Shine, was devoted to looking at the five different parts, and they are serve God, honor Christ, invite others, nurture growth, and engage culture. We took a close look at the first of these, to serve God, and we talked about how serving God is really about serving others. Serving God is really about serving others. And Jesus came to be a servant, and he called us to be servants as well. And through this series, I pray that the Lord has moved in you, in your heart, to get involved in service. And so we talked about honoring Christ and what it means to worship, and that worship is something that we do. It's not an emotion, though it's an emotional experience. It's not an emotion. We learned that worship is an outward expression of our belief in God, our belief about God. Then we looked at the mandate that we have to invite others, that inviting others into a relationship with the Lord is really our primary purpose. And we talked about the tremendous need for the people to know Jesus, or people that know Jesus, to make sure that we're inviting others into contact with him. And then last week we talked about nurturing growth, how that as Christians we should be maturing in our spiritual growth. We talked about what it means to grow in grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. And he wants us to mature spiritually. And he wants to transform us. But we have to nurture that growth. He doesn't just knock us down and make us grow. We have to cooperate with him in our own spiritual growth. So this morning we're going to look at the final part of Shine, and it's engage culture. Engage culture. We live in a time of division in the United States. We live in a time of great division. Some say that we live in a time of unprecedented division, that we have more division now than we've ever had in the history of our country. Now, personally, I think that's a little bit dramatic. If I remember correctly, we had a civil war between 1861 and 1865. Okay, and so that's maybe a little little overboard to say that, well, it's unprecedented. But so I don't know that it's all that dramatic. But at the same time, we do see more division about spiritual matters than any time in our history. Today, in the United States, more and more people identify themselves as having no religious affiliation or that they're atheists. We have a huge uptick in those two categories over the past 10, 20 years. And so we ask what's causing this trend. And usually, the church, we point to media and politics. When we think about those trends, we say, well, you know, the world's just getting worse and worse, and people are inundated with more and more ungodly things. And so, therefore, the media and politics are responsible for causing this even greater separation from God. I have a little bit of a different idea about that. I know that shocks you. But I believe the church, one day, or over a period of time, the church went inside and never came back out. The church went inside and never came back out. Now, this happened decades ago, so relax. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about those other people. All right? And so, but for some reason, the church just went inside. We went inside the four walls and we stayed there. And we have this idea that the government can fix it. In the United States, a weird thing, actually, because this doesn't happen in any other part of the world. No other country in the world does the church do this. But in the United States, we want the government to be our evangelists. That's what we want. We want the government to pass laws and all of those kinds of things. We blame the world for our failure to reach them. Let me say that again. We blame the world for our failure to reach them. You might be thinking, well, Pastor Jason, the world's getting worse. It's getting worse and worse all the time. I mean, isn't that their fault? Well, partially. But we can't look for the government to pass laws that transform lives. At best, laws, they restrain behavior. At best. That's the best we can get. Laws will never transform a heart. Amen. The church in the United States, including right here in Charleston, West Virginia, we spend a lot of time and a lot of energy on laws and government and politics, but we don't spend a lot of time and energy on reaching the world with the gospel. You see, China is officially an atheist country. If you have a church in China, you can do that maybe. But you have to be registered and you have to be monitored. You know. If you have any other kind of church, that they will probably shut you down. They eventually will shut you down and you may be arrested and thrown in prison for a very long time, quite frankly. As a result, China is an atheist country. They arrest pastors and church members there. And at the same time, if you want to go to the Haidian church in China, you will have to wait in line. And a line that's about 500 feet long. And they baptize 500 people every Sunday. And it's a country that has almost reached 100 million Christians. Can you praise the Lord for that revival in China? Here's the thing, is that the church in China, they are the minority, and they're still reaching people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let me be very, very clear this morning. We wanting laws that are consistent with Christian values. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, that's a good thing. We're supposed to want those things. However, it doesn't matter which laws are passed and which ones aren't passed. The world still needs Jesus. Laws don't make people saved. I got like 2 amens out of that. Laws don't make people saved. Amen. That takes Jesus. I assure you, our country will not get more holy because a law is passed. I 100% guarantee that. A law being passed will not make our country more holy. The world gets better when it gets Jesus. Amen. So I made some people mad last week. I'll get the rest this week. Just in case. Just in case. Last week didn't upset you too much. You see, but this is the problem that we have in today's church. Is that we're looking for the government to fix it. Really? What law were you following when you received the gospel? What law were you following when you decided to believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus? What law were you following when you decided that you were going to follow Jesus as your Lord? Which one? Can preacher just tell the truth? Probably, I don't know. I haven't asked you all. But probably, at least the vast majority of people in this room believe that abortion is wrong. You know what we want? And I want to. We want the government to outlaw abortion. You know what we won't do as a church? We won't engage a teenage girl or a woman and give her the gospel so that never becomes an issue in her life. Right. Amen. That's where we fail as a church. We want the government to fix it when people need Jesus. Amen. I knew this was going to be good. So when we talk about engaging culture, that's what we're talking about. I'm absolutely not talking about accepting the values of culture. I don't want those things in my house, much less in my church. But engaging culture means that I have contact with people who need Jesus. It's about evangelism. See, we read about us being the light of the world. Here's what Jesus said just before that, by the way. In verse 13, he said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." Jesus looked at his followers and he called them salt. Now, long before refrigerators, people used salt to preserve and purify things. And it just allows things to last longer. It keeps things from spoiling. If you took a handful of ground beef and a handful of beef jerky and you set them out on the parking lot, you would quickly see the impact of salt. And salt actually preserves things. The ground beef will rot much quicker. Okay. And so salt, he makes this comparison between salt that tastes good and salt that isn't salty. Okay. Salt, as a substance, salt can only lose its saltiness if it's mixed with something else. Salt only loses its saltiness if it's mixed with something else. As a matter of fact, if you take a box or whatever of salt, and you open it up and seal it. You seal it up, you can leave that thing sitting there for 10 years and it's going to be just as salty as the day you open it, as long as it's sealed up. It's when it gets mixed with other things that it loses its saltiness. A lot of the salt that they used it back in that day, it came from the Dead Sea or the area around the Dead Sea. Quite frankly, there was a lot of gypsum and other stuff mixed in with it. And it wasn't that good. It wasn't good for anything. It had too many impurities. And so Jesus asked a question here. What good is salt that's been mixed with other things? You know what they did with it? They did what we do with it. They did what we would do with it. I have a bag of rock salt right there. It's winter time. What do I do with it? I throw it out and it melts snow. Anybody want, I give you a cup full of this and you can put that in your dinner this evening. Anybody want to try it? No, because it's not pure salt. And Jesus said it is thrown out to be trampled underfoot by men. They scattered it on the path. This is what they literally did with it. They took that impure salt and they scattered it on the path to keep the weeds down. That's what they did. About the same as we do with snow, isn't it? Except they didn't have a big old truck. They had to do it all by hand. We're called to be salt. We're called to be pure salt. 2 Corinthians 6:17. There are actually quotes from Isaiah chapter 52. But Paul quoted that when he said, "Come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord." We're called to be salt. And when I consider this, I ask myself a question. How can Christians be salt without all of that other stuff? When the church is the church, I strongly believe this. When the church is the church is different. When the church is different from the world, that and only then is when it can be salt. If my life, I have to ask myself that question, is my life different from the life that we see in the world today? Is my life different than that? Or would anybody be able to tell the difference? Has my salt, have I been mixed with other things? You know the truth. I kind of struggle with this in terms of the church and how the church does ministry and all those kinds of things. I'll struggle with this sometimes. I've struggled with it over the past few years, trying to figure out, what in the world, how do you actually do this? I read all the church growth books and evangelism books. I read them all. I go to conferences and I hear about it. And I hear that we need to have laser lights and video walls. Fog machines.
Amen.
I'm just saying. This is what I hear. This is what I see when I go to those things. I hear that I need to wear jeans and t-shirts when I preach. Okay. I had one person, this is funny. I had one person tell me, not kidding. I had one person tell me they only came once or twice. I'm thinking once, but they might have came another time. But I had this person tell me, I told you last week, people complain about weird things, right? Did I say that? They had this person tell me that I shouldn't wear a jacket and dress shirt when I preach. I said, okay. Why? You give me a valid reason, like I have other clothes. It's not that big of a deal. And I said, why? And this is what the person said. Because it shouldn't matter what you wear. Well, like I have nothing to say. If it don't matter, why does it bother you that I wear a jacket? I wear a jacket every day of my life. It's just a thing, you know. I just do. If you see me tomorrow morning, I promise you, I will have a jacket on. As a matter of fact, I'm a little bit less formal today because tomorrow morning I will have a tie on as well. How about that? I wear a tie to work and don't wear a tie to church. That's probably some kind. I mean, I'm sure it's in the Bible somewhere that I'm seeing. But I'm told that I need to wear jeans and t-shirts. I mean, I'm told that I need to preach more motivationally. I need to talk more about how to manage money or how to get along with your spouse or how to achieve your goals. My opinion, those are mixing salt with other things.
Yes. Amen.
Are those things important? Sure. Are they the gospel? No. Will accomplish those things bring someone salvation? No. See, I mean, this is what I'm told. This is what I hear. That, you know, I'm to come up here on Sunday morning and give you basically a popular psychology talk and then throw a Bible verse in. It's all good. You want reality? I have 2 degrees and a license that says I can do that. All right? But really, that's what I do every day. That doesn't transform lives. See, I still believe, even in 2020, just as he did very many years ago, when Jesus stood on the side of a mountain and he said he wants us to be salt, I believe he still wants salt, not mixed with that other stuff. Amen. I still believe the gospel. The Apostle Peter said in Acts 4:12, he said, there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given whereby men must be saved. I still believe that God wants to free people from sin. I still believe that we need salvation. I still believe that the Bible is the Word of God, and I believe that I'll just stick to preaching that, if that's all right.
Amen.
We're called to be salt. We're called to be pure. We're called to make a difference. We are called to be a purifying and preserving force in the world. And the way we do that is that we have to be the salt of the earth. For too long, the church in the United States has been the salt of the salt shaker. We've been the salt of the salt shaker. See, the church is the salt shaker. Look around. This is the salt shaker.
Yeah.
And we're really good at being salt in here. Sometimes we get real salty in here. We need to be salty out there to have an impact. We're the salt of the earth, not salt of the shaker. You might be asking, Pastor Jason, what in the world does this have to do with engaged culture? Everything. Has everything to do with it. Here's what Apostle Paul says, 2 Corinthians 5:19 and 20. He has committed to us the word of reconciliation. Therefore, everybody say therefore. Because you've been reconciled. Therefore, we are ambassadors. Everybody say ambassadors. For Christ, as though God were making an appeal through us. We beg you, on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. Are we ambassadors for Christ? Are we at least trying to have an impact on our world? See, we talk a lot about how the world's getting worse and worse. We talk a lot about how the world needs to change and get back to God. What I pray is that we start talking about how we can engage our culture in such a way that we can get the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. If we want people to be changed, they will be changed by the gospel. We are ambassadors for Christ. Ambassadors don't just hang around in the main office. The ambassador to Canada is not sitting in the White House today. He's in Canada. Right? Does this make sense?
Yes.
And we can't just sit in the main office. They're representing and they're serving as an ambassador for other people. So we have this dilemma. If we're supposed to be separate from the world, how in the world are we supposed to have contact with it? I mean, how does that work? Well, the Bible has something to say about that. I'll do nothing. 1 Corinthians 5. I wrote you in my letter, Paul says. So apparently he wrote another letter, right? Before 1 Corinthians. There was like a 0 Corinthians. I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with immoral people. I did not not at all mean with the immoral people of this world, or with the covetous, the swindlers, or with idolaters. For then you would have to go out of the world. I just want to comment here. He's saying, look, I told you to separate yourself from some immoral people, but not the ones that are in the world. Go on down. Actually, I wrote to you not to associate with any so-called brother if he is an immoral person, or covetous, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or a swindler, not even to eat with such a one. Uh-oh. I mean, pay close attention. He says, look, I told you that you need to engage with simple people in the world. But if somebody's in the church and they're calling themselves a Christian and they act like a heathen, just don't even eat with that person. Now, we can argue against this all we want to, but you've got to argue with the Bible, not me.
Right. That's what it says.
Why are we told to engage with those people in the world? One reason, because we're salt. We are the salt of the earth. We have to get out of the salt shaker. We have to engage culture instead of hiding away from it or fighting against the people so much that they don't want anything to do with us. I'll hurry, maybe.
You're good.
1 Corinthians 9, 22 and 23, Paul said this. He said, I've become all things to all men so that I may by all means save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel so that I may become a fellow partaker of it. Now I want to understand this morning that Paul did not say he became immoral so he could engage people. That's not what he said. He's talking about engaging the culture that he was in at the time. He gave a bunch of examples. He said, to the weak I became as one who's weak. To one who was under the law I became as one under the law. To one who was without the law I became as one without the law. He said, look, I know all of these people. I know how all they were. And I just try to relate to them. That's what he said. One of the problems today is we fight against people more than we fight against ideas. Does the Bible say something about that? Sure does. Romans chapter 12. Y'all remember Romans chapter 12. It's the chapter in the Bible where it says, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present yourselves, your bodies as a living sacrifice. Everybody remember that one? Mm-hmm. Here's what it says on down in there. It says, bless those who persecute you. Yeah, I underlined them in red for you. Bless those. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men, if possible, so far as it depends on you. Be at peace with all men. Bless those that persecute you. In 2020, we take the opposite approach. We fight and argue about who's right. We say stuff like, I have a right to freedom of speech just as much as they do. That's true. That's true for our Constitution in the United States. That's absolutely true. Here's the thing. Just because I can do something doesn't mean I should. Just throw it out there. No one's ever changed anybody's mind through a Facebook post. No one ever. Like, you're not changing people's mind. You're doing one or two things. You're getting a bunch of people who agree with you and say, oh, right on, brother. Or you're making a bunch of people mad.
All right.
You're changing absolutely nothing. Just throw it out there. He says, do not be haughty in mind. Look at the second underlying part. Don't be haughty in mind. We're right about all of our ideas. Right? I mean, we're right. It's just how it is. I'm right, and you're right. Even if you're wrong, right? You're right. And even if I'm wrong, I'm right. It's just how we see it. We're right about everything, especially when it comes to politics. You might get mad at me more mad than you already are about this, but I believe Christians have ruined their chances to have a gospel conversation with a lot of people because of the way we handle politics. Amen. You say that again. I believe there are a lot of Christians who have ruined their chances of having a gospel conversation with a lot of people because of the way we handle politics.
That's right,
We believe we're right and everybody else is wrong. And I'm not even talking about the stuff that the Bible says. We get into arguments about political ideas that the Bible says nothing about. Amen. And I pray that someday the church, that we have the same level of concern about those who are living this world without Jesus as we do about some law that's probably going to be meaningless at the end. The commandment, fear not. It's said in the Bible more than don't commit adultery, by the way. And we live in political fear constantly, Christians. He says never pay back evil for evil. Can I tell you this morning that getting someone back isn't biblical? I'm just going to say that and I'm going to just move on. Getting someone back is not biblical.
That's right.
Respect what is right in the sight of men. Now this one we like. Well, stand up for what's right. Good. We need to. We need to stand up for what's right. We absolutely need to stand up for what's right. We need to stand up for biblical principles. We need to do so in love and grace, Hallelujah.
Yes, amen.
Ephesians 4:15, Paul said to speak the truth in love. What I would suggest to all of us is that if we're going to talk about sin, that we need to talk about it from a place of concern for the sinner, not to tell them how terrible they are. Amen. I'll give you an example. I believe the Bible clearly teaches us that abortion is wrong. At the same time, I'm very well aware that the devil has constructed some really good arguments that a lot of people believe. He really has. He's done a good job on that issue. He's done a really good job of giving people some arguments for abortion that they believe. He's done an excellent job of creating that. 2 Corinthians 4:3-5, Paul said this. He said, if our gospel is veiled, if our gospel is hidden, it's veiled to those who are perishing, in whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. They're blind. We get upset for them at them because they can't see, but they're blind. The God of this world has blinded their eyes. And I believe that's the case with abortion. He's created some really good arguments. They're blind as you and I were once blind. What happens when we engage them in a conversation instead of just calling them evil? What happens when we try to understand them instead of just writing them on? See, I have a friend for years, decades, was a supporter of abortion on demand with no restrictions. Then her daughter-in-law became pregnant. She found out that her daughter-in-law was considering an abortion. My friend lost her mind at the thought of it. And because of that, because I hadn't written her off and I hadn't called her evil, I was able to have a conversation with her about the sanctity of life. Now, I'm not telling you that to tell you that I get it right and everybody else, I have it right and everybody else has it wrong. That's not my point. Trust me, I get it wrong a lot of times. The reason for me telling you that story is to illustrate how different the outcome can be when we engage culture instead of hiding from them or making them our enemies. You and I are the ones called to bring the gospel to the world. You and me. If no one will talk to us anymore, we're going to fail the Great Commission.
Amen.
He says, be at peace with all men. Be at peace with all men. Don't go around starting fights. Christians, we can say a lot of things about what's going on in the world today. At the same time, if we say those things in an aggressive way, we create more conflict and we lose our opportunities to reach the person with the gospel. The gospel creates enough conflict all by itself. The truth of God, it cuts and it causes pain and it causes conflict all by itself. We don't need to create more because we have a bad attitude. This is what we're called to be. We're called to be salt. We're called to be light. Jesus said this, Matthew 28:19, go therefore to all the world. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is our calling. This is our calling. We aren't called to promote a political agenda. We're called to promote the gospel. We aren't called to bring people to our way of thinking. We're called to bring people to Jesus. We aren't called to make conflict. We're called to make disciples.
Amen.
We aren't called to teach people about the Constitution even. We're called to teach people about Jesus. You might be thinking about this and say, Pastor Jason, you know what, that all sounds great. Sounds great. But I don't know how. I will tell you this. I'm going to talk to people like me. I'm going to talk to pastors for a minute. There's only one here, but they might listen. We've done a terrible job of teaching people how to get out of the salt shaker.
Amen.
We've done awful over the years. But here's what I want to tell you. If Jesus has changed your life, if you believe the gospel of Jesus Christ, if Jesus has transformed you, if he's made you into a new creature, and you can even be the least bit excited about that, you already have all that you need to be salt.
Yes.
That's good.
You have all that you need to be salt. You might say, you know what, I don't know how to do all that apologetic stuff and be able to prove this and that. You don't need to. All you have to say is, you know what, here, Jesus changed my life. I can tell you about it.
Yes.
Be willing to listen to somebody. Say, sometimes you have to say, you know what, I don't know about all that, but let me tell you what God did for me.
Amen.
Sometimes you have to say, you know what, I don't know about all that, but you know what, why don't you come to church with me Sunday? We get intimidated by what we don't know, but man, just remember, you know the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. You have a direct line to him. His Spirit is in your life. You already have all that you need to be salt. This morning as we wrap up, we ask you, are we salt? Are we light shining? I pray that 2020 is the biggest, that this church, I don't even know how to measure this, but I pray that this church has the biggest impact on the world that it's ever had in 2020.
Yes.
I pray that we reach more people with the gospel than we ever have.
Yes.
Amen.
I pray that more people get involved than they ever had before.
Amen.
And we do that when we shine. Can we all stand this morning?